This is Oft Off Topic, a show where two men with the attention spans of a squirrel try and fail to stay on topic with today's subject. Where will their oral meanderings take us? Well, stick around and listen, because today's Oft Off Topic is... Howard the Duck. The character, the comic, and the movie. Nate, what do you know about Howard the Duck? The comic, the character, and the movie?
I know he exists. He was big back in the day. I remember seeing the movie. I remember duck boobs. I remember some of the comics. I remember when I used to frequent comic shops, I would often see Howard the Duck comic on there. And I'd be like, oh, look. And I'd go and look at it, and then I'd put it down and pick up an X-Men comic.
Yeah, you'd look at it, and the guy would be like, hey, that's $20 because that's from 77. And you'd be like, oh, never mind. Yep. I remember that. I remember seeing it too and be like, hey, that looks like it would be fun, but never actually reading it.
The few runs I was like, I have well over 3,000 comics. Yeah, I haven't collected comics in, at this point, 20 years. I was 90s is when I was doing all this. And I think they had some, I'm pretty sure they said they had some Howard Duck comics back then. Or maybe it was just a case. But I mean, I was all about some like Age of Apocalypse. When I was like, that's the last time I remember
the big X-Men series.
Really, truly collecting comics for a reason. Like, oh, I'm doing this.
Yeah, it's because Marvel told us to, because they put really shiny stuff on all the covers.
Oh,
it's like, hey, limited edition.
So, but
I think we mentioned all this about the comic collecting of the 90s, all the fancy, steel covers and this and that. Howard the Duck's kind of responsible for some of this. We'll get into that in a couple minutes, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah. I remember the same thing as you.
I definitely got sucked in by that stuff. And I was part of the reason. No, I take it back. I was not part of the reason why they crashed and went bankrupt. It was collectors who were buying, like, I'm buying this one to read, this one to keep. It was them.
I knew people who did that too. I at least read the comics I bought. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I
also got a lot of flack from the same people who are like, you're getting fingerprints on it. It'll be worth nothing. I'm like, well, I'm reading it, dude. Shut up.
I will admit I did that for a few of them. Like the ones I had a feeling that they would be big, I went ahead and grabbed a second version.
Which is I did the same thing, and it turns out everybody else had the same thoughts, so they're not worth anything because everybody has them.
Exactly.
It's that weird one obscure Casper comic, the Casper Wolverine crossover, something weird like that that's worth money. So I remember all the same thing about Howard the Duck as you do. Movie, comics, duck memories, all the fun stuff. Weird clips from the movie that just kind of traumatize young children, and kind of that dumb song that they play at the end, Howard the Duck, which is oddly enough made by an all-star writing team. Also, it's going to be Howard's 50th birthday coming up soon in November, I believe. So, hey, happy birthday, Howard.
Oh, he shows up in the latest Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, I know he showed up in the stinger at the end of the first one. Was it the first one?
Yep, he actually showed up in the first one, second one, and the third one, and he was in Marvel's What If.
Oh, he definitely was in Marvel's What If. He had expanded, like, it was less of a cameo, more of like, he was a character in that. I mean, he wasn't the whole episode, but he was there for a bit.
Yeah, he was a big part of it. When, T'Challa was talking to him in his little cube.
Yep. Seth Green. Yay, Seth Green.
Yay, Seth Green. We'll get talking about Seth Green in the role as well. So here we go, Nate. We're going to talk about Howard, his comics, and the 1986 movie, which, while not good, is actually the first ever Marvel feature-length film released in theaters. Heck, by the end of this podcast, you'll see how a psychopath mailing bird bones to the Marvel headquarters led to the Toy Story franchise. More on that later as well. So this episode is actually going to be somewhat similar to a turducken. At the center of this is going to be the movie, or the duck. And then surrounding this duck will be the production story behind the movie, or the chicken, as it were. And finally, the comic books in the story will be the turkey that surrounds everything. Got it? Maybe I'm just hungry. I don't know. First, to touch on Howard and his comic book origins. He was created by the original Gerber baby, Steve Gerber, back in 1973, and first appeared in the series Man-Thing, who is not quite a man and not quite a thing, but boy howdy do those who know fear burn at his touch. Howard the Duck was basically a side character that just popped up randomly and was a wisecracking detective duck. He hung around for a few years in the series until Marvel editors reared their monstrous head and said, hey, we're not really a fan of this comedic duck being in this horror series. This is a horror series. Scrap the duck. So Steve Gerber, disappointed, did it though. And in one issue, they literally just have Man-Thing and some barbarian walking along with Howard, and Howard just falls off cliff, and that's the end of him. They just look down and like, well, he's dead, bye. And they never spoke about him again. However, it turns out readers were not very happy about this. They really liked Howard. They liked the fact that he offset that horror, and he had some nice wisecracks, and he was a well-written character in the series. So an angry letter writing petition started, with one fan even sending duck bones through the mail to the editors to make their point. And apparently that worked. Well, probably not the intimidation part, but seeing there was a lot of money to be had, Marvel was all on board to get Howard back into the story. Moral of this story, mail bones to editors if they cancel stuff you don't like. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll work with HBO or Netflix. They cancel something, mail them bones. See what happens. Don't tell them I told you to do it.
Right.
Yep.
Well, that was also back in the day when writing letters meant something.
Yeah. Nowadays, people just go on Facebook and complain instead, which nobody cares about there.
Well, nobody cares about it until it gets big enough.
Yeah, true. So with dollar signs in their eyes, Marvel goes back to Steve Gerber and says, "Hey, Steve, baby, you want to go from being a freelance writer to a full-time Marvel talent under contract writing Howard the Duck?" Steve said, "Of course I do. That's good money. That's job stability. Of course I want to get a contract and work for you, Marvel." So he goes from freelancer to full-time and starts writing Howard the Duck #1 in 1976. This contract thing is going to be important later, too, by the way. We're building a story.
I take it he didn't read the whole contract.
He did not read the whole contract. And yeah, it kind of bites him in the butt. 1976's Howard the Duck issue #1 was a massive success, selling out almost instantly in comic stores, and at the time was a best-selling #1 issue of a comic not based on a movie. Apparently, the only series that was selling nearly as good of them in the late 70s was Star Wars when it came out in about like 79 comics books. So Howard the Duck, extremely popular in the late 70s. Also, what helped the popularity was the scarcity of it. The fact Marvel didn't anticipate how popular he would be, they only printed 275,000 copies, and neither did the money-grubbling collectors that were out to make a buck. There's a story about a comic store owner in Cleveland deducted that the Howard the Duck #1 would be super popular in Cleveland because that's where it took place. So he followed around the comic delivery truck to each store and immediately bought out their entire stock, and netting him around 900 copies to sell at his own store. Which wasn't a bad idea because by the end of the first year, the comic was selling for an average of $12.50 with a high of $25 in some places. And that's not bad since it was a 25-cent cover price. And a lot of people say that this might be where the whole collecting and gouging thing started too. All from one dude named Jim Kovacs. He should be shamed for these actions. Boo him, I say. Boo!
Boo. Yeah,
but also, rumor is he might be the person who will popularize the comic book long box. You know, those long cardboard boxes that you stack the comics in? Rumor has it he's the one to popularize that. Weird.
Well, I mean...
Yeah, just fun side things you learn.
You win some, you lose some. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, fuck that guy. Because, he literally apparently just spent the entire day learned the publication truck that was dropping off all the comics at the various stores, 7-Elevens and whatnot. Just followed them around. I was like, hey, I want to buy all those off you right now. And, of course, employees who didn't care. They're just like, whatever. Dude wants to buy these. Makes it easier on my job.
Yeah, last I heard that more recently. I mean... recently being relative. When I worked at GameStop when the Wii's came out, man, like parents would follow the UPS truck and like ask him how many Wii's they were dropping off of places. It was so in demand. And I just remember like we would put out there, hey, we're only expecting 4 Wii's, and there'd be 10 people outside. I'm like, do you not see the sign?
We put these signs up to warn you.
Like, and then first 4 people come up, they buy them, and it's like, sorry, like as the sign said, we only have
number 5 is like, well, we had no way of knowing. It's like, well, there was a sign on the window,
and they would always get mad. It's like, dude, I mean, GameStop was loving it though. It's like they were,
because they'd probably buy stuff while they were waiting too. The occasional soda or other game.
Well, the GameStop loved it just because it was profits. Like selling those Wii, they got a cut of that, and so they were just like making money hand over fist, which actually screwed them later because them selling those Wii's like that was messing with the metrics. Because once the Wii's kind of fell out of fashion and it wasn't in demand anymore, according to the graph, it was the line was going up in 2019 or whatever it was. Maybe it was 2018. Is what up, and then all of a sudden it crashed. No, I'm not going back far enough, am I? No,
2014 or something. We're thinking
Jesus
maybe.
Christ. 2009 maybe, because I thought there was a 9 on there. I'm gonna do it. I try to avoid doing Google, but let me see.
Nintendo was released in 2006 in North America.
2006.
Yep.
So
November
it must
19th.
be. Oh, yeah. Okay. 2006. Man, I can't believe it's been so long since I worked at GameStop. I forget sometimes. So, so 2006, and even going into the next year, like, dude, by God, profits were amazing. So it must have been 2006. 2006.
And they're
Profits
like,
were
this
amazing.
graph chart is obviously going to continue in this
Yeah.
exact same pattern for the rest of time.
And that's the thing about, like, I'm not sure if it's an American business or all business across the world, but basically it's like the whole premise is beating last year. It's always about beating last year. And I always
That's
get
the
frustrated.
corporation mentality. You got to
Yes.
get them shareholders happy.
And I always get frustrated. And I was like, look, there's only a finite amount of people out there. Like, it's just who are, then you narrow it down for the people who are actually looking for this product you sell. And then depending on the product you sell, I mean, people aren't buying this all the time. People aren't buying a Wii, then come back later and buying another Wii. This doesn't work that way.
And then you raise your hand, you bring that up, and the salesman's like, well, that's your job, sir, is to sell them a second Wii. And you're like, that's not how this works, dude.
Yeah, and so, man, I just remember they got all upset. They're like, oh, our profits are down. Like, yeah, no shit, your profits are down because no one's buying the Wii anymore.
Yeah,
now
everybody has one now.
And man, I saw the death of GameStop long before I left. And I love saying I left because that's true. But that doesn't like imply that I was fired, which I was. But when I left,
you can't fire me. I quit.
Right. And the thing was, I got fired over such bullshit reasons. I mean, ultimately, it ended up a good thing. Like, I'm glad I'm not at GameStop anymore. Yeah, it's just they were very exploitative. I didn't really realize how bad it was until I was out. But man, yeah, I just remember going to the conference and they were just like, look at this graph. They were kind of like, well, we understand it was because of the Wii, but we really need to meet these numbers. Like, well, you're not gonna.
Yep. Sorry about that. You're probably
So-
going to lose your job for setting them numbers a little too high, buddy.
Yeah, like, and I always say that, okay, here's our projection. Here's our stretch goal. Like, our projection is this, and it's fairly reasonable. And here's our stretch goal, and it's like unreasonable.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, we got cut back. We didn't hit our budget. I'm like, well, because you're insane.
Yeah.
You thought you'd sell almost double than you did last year? What are
you
crazy?
projected you're going to make 30 billion this year and you only made 8 billion, you know?
Yeah, I mean, pay attention to the number. Like, look at more of the graph. Y'all pull your heads out of your asses and look around.
Yep. Zoom out a little bit on the graph.
Yeah, and pay attention to who you're selling these to. It's just, it infuriated me. And of course, their whole model was selling used games. That's where the bread and butter was. And I always hated it because when I went in there, I assumed that the companies, Nintendo, Sony, they would get a small percentage of used games. No.
Nope.
Like they only got a cut of their new game, and after that, like all the profit was going to GameStop. So I don't know, man. It was
and when they lowball people for like $2 a game, and then immediately turn around and sell them for 15.
And I don't know what you think. I'm like, oh, poor games or poor Microsoft. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying poor creators because Microsoft sure got a cut, but so did the creators who made the game. They don't get anything.
Nope.
If they sell them used. So yeah.
Back to creators. Steve Gerber wrote a comic storyline in 1976 where Howard the Duck ran for president. And there's a story that this whole storyline got Howard enough write-in votes on the ballot that it actually showed up in the polling processes. Stanley even said so in one of the comic letters to the editor section. However, some research shows that that's actually kind of a lie. Turns out Stanley might be a little bit of a fibber, Nate. So yeah, it was just something Marvel threw it out there for exposure. There's no evidence Howard the Duck got enough write-in votes to make it on the polls. But I do assume that people did actually write in for him. At least a few did.
Yeah, and I mean, I say awesome. I just ironically awesome because, as someone who enjoys a good laugh and who's a nerd, I like the idea of like, oh, Howard the Duck on your ballot. But then it's like these people who are voting Howard the Duck on their ballot, then like the other person wins, like the person no one wanted to win. It's just like, oh wow. I guess
lay whoops. Maybe my vote would have counted this time.
Yeah, this monster won by only a few votes, and like you threw your vote away.
Yeah, that'd probably be how it'll work out someday.
Yeah, I gave a friend of mine a lot of guff. I don't try to leave this vague. They voted for a third party, and they stood by that vote of the third party. And we should live in a world where your vote for that third party should count. Yes, you should be able to vote your conscience. But that being said, the other two first and second parties, one of them's gonna win. Your third party, they're just not gonna. So there's not. Yeah,
the Electoral College kind of takes care of that.
Yeah, like that third party you're voting for isn't even on all the ballots of the other states. So don't do it. And so then
the only way third party seems to win is on the local level, like up to governors, maybe if you're lucky.
Right. And so then so if that would have had to vote for a 1 or 2, they would have voted for 1 and not 2. Well, 2 won. And so I would tell her, she's like, oh, I voted for this third party. I'm like, oh, so you meant you voted for the second party? She's like, no, I voted the third party. I'm like, yeah, but your vote actually helped the third party. She gets so mad.
Just like King and Kodos said way back in the day, I'll vote third party. Sure, throw your vote away. Ha 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 ha. Simpsons reference. King Kodos running for president.
Pause. Let pause. Okay. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. I was standing up, and you probably didn't even hear, but as I was sitting up, I yanked the cord out of my headphones, so all of a sudden it went dead silent, and I couldn't hear anything.
Gotcha. So, nope. I don't think I was saying anything important during that time either, to be honest.
Cool.
1977. Howard is popular as hell, and all of a sudden Disney comes calling with their Donald the Duck trademark in hand and says, we're here to sue. How about that? Long story short, Disney didn't like the fact that, two-legged talking duck was a little close to Donald, so they told Marvel that they need to change him up a little bit, and Marvel did eventually agree to follow a set of rules when drawing Howard so he didn't look so much like Donald. Essentially, they wanted Marvel to put pants on Howard and change the shape and color of Howard's head, bill, feet, eyes, toes, and feathers. So, pretty much everything. Marvel said, okay, we'll do that. And that same year, actually, that the lawsuit was going on, Howard the Duck's still incredibly popular, so Marvel wanted to strike while the iron was hot and greenlit Steve Gerber to do a comic strip for the newspapers. So right now, we got a comic book and a newspaper strip that Steve Gerber's doing. And while this was good for fans of Howard the Duck and Steve Gerber because he got more money, it was eventually going to be his downfall. Because you see, Steve Gerber was not good with deadlines and was prone to turn in his work at the last minute possible. And while Marvel was able to work around this with the comic books a little bit, newspapers were absolutely unwilling to work with the late thing because they need to be on a very strict schedule. Very strict. Yeah, because they got to be out daily at 6 a.m. in the morning. And they basically, the newspapers went to Marvel and said, this ain't working. Get rid of that guy. So they did.
Yeah, it's like, look, man, we have a deadline. We're not going to stop the presses because Howard the Duck's late.
Yeah, right. And Marvel, they're only printing a few 100,000 issues or something. The New York Times, who's waiting for Howard the Duck, is printing millions of issues. So that's very understandable. There's a lot of money there in the newspapers, especially back in the 70s.
But that's probably the last time it was profitable.
Yeah, honestly, actually, what really killed off newspapers? Craigslist. And that's because people start advertising on Craigslist instead of the newspapers because the newspapers' classifieds, huge source of revenue for the newspapers. Massive. Yep. Advertising in newspapers back in the day was super expensive too, like $100 for a weekend ad in the Seattle Times kind of stuff. But that's what you had to do back then because there wasn't much else. Then Craigslist came along, you could list all that stuff for free, and newspapers said, well, shit. Because apparently from what I've heard, they made more off of the classifieds than they did off their advertising usually.
Well, that makes sense.
Gerber is released from the comic strip. Gerber was pissed. So he decided to go make a big public stink and tell everybody how dumb that was and how much he hates Marvel for it. In fact, he made such a big stink about this that Marvel said, you know what, screw it. You're out of here too. We're done with this. Bye. And they fired Gerber. Gerber was even more pissed over this. And only 4 more issues of Howard would run with Gerber gone. People apparently said that the quality of the series took a major nosedive, and that's pretty much the reason it got canceled. Same with the comic strip. It would get canceled shortly thereafter as well. And Howard the Duck would basically just hang on in 1979 for a brief 9-issue magazine series that ended in 1981. And then it would be another 5 years before he'd show up in another comic book. This magazine also was the first time he had sex with a human being. Fun side note.
Why?
Because it probably sold a lot of issues. People want to see duck on woman action.
Want to see something that's kind of bestiality, but not really?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, going back to that John Waters episode, people were going up there to see, educational sex films of people giving birth. So,
I mean, I guess it's something.
Hey, got to see something, I guess. Well, all this was going on. You know who became a huge fan of Howard the Duck, Nate? The one and only master of the midichlorians, George Lucas. He was a huge fan of the character in the comics, and he loved the humor. He just loved the whole aesthetic of it. And he read all the comics, big fan, got Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill into it. and thought to himself, this would do excellent as a movie. I would love to take this character and make it into a movie. In fact, after he was done doing Star Wars, George Lucas had 2 movie ideas he wanted to work on. One was the Howard the Duck movie. The other one was a movie about an archaeologist who finds the Ark of the Covenant. Sound familiar? Yep. He was down to 2 choices, Howard the Duck or Indiana Jones. Want to know which one he picked first?
The world will never know.
Yeah. Actually, he picked Howard the Duck first and wanted to do Howard the Duck before Indiana Jones. So he went to Marvel and said, hey, I want to get the rights to Howard the Duck. And they said, we already sold those to somebody, buddy. Sorry. Turns out Marvel, in kind of a dumb way, because, they didn't really know their licenses were really primed for movies back then. They packaged up a bunch of characters and sold them to Universal Studios, who's going to make a series of made-for-TV movies and TV shows. This package of characters was Howard the Duck, Thor, Hulk, Miss Marvel, Power Man, Iron Fist, Doctor Strange, Submariner, Captain America, and the Human Torch. The only movies that came out of this were the made-for-TV movies that you remember from the 70s that were just god-awful. You can find clips of them on YouTube that are just bad. And the only thing that really actually made it out of this whole package deal was the Incredible Hulk TV series with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno back in the day. That sad.
Which, looking back, are also kind of bad. But I mean,
it was bad, but it was popular. So
right. I mean, yes.
And I remember watching it and being like, "Ooh, a Hulk TV show, neat!" As a little kid, and watching and being like, "This is boring and dumb. I don't like this." But also, I wasn't really the target audience. I don't think back when I was 7.
I didn't see. I think I missed a lot of the TV shows. I did see the TV movies, though. The TV movies they did weren't great, but they also were better than the TV show.
Yeah,
the TV show is like, I still remember. What was it? This one where, it was a movie too. Like Hulk went on trial, and he had to they put Bruce Banner, or was it?
That was like the trial of the Hulk
Banner
in like 85 or something like that.
So it was a movie. Okay.
Yeah, so, I think it was like a made-for-TV movie.
I mean, some of the shows were just like, oh, I want to buy a used car. This guy's kind of a dick to me. I'm going to turn to Hulk now and throw a bunch of stuff around. And it's like, as much as Lou Ferrigno is impressive, I mean, he would handily hand me my ass, but he's not
something you're going to run in terror from the instant he gets mad, really.
Yeah, I mean, if he showed up in New York now as Lou Ferrigno, like Hulk, like let's full green Hulk Lou Ferrigno from the 70s, and he started rampaging downtown, it would be very unimpressive. I mean,
it would be extremely unimpressive.
He flipped a car. Oh no! He broke apart that particle board. Oh
no! He threw that water cooler at somebody. Oh no! Look at the strength. He threw a 30-gallon jug of water. Woo!
So yeah, I mean, they did what they did. That they did what they could with what they had back in the day. It's just, I mean,
it's not like this was a high budget thing. This was very
Yeah, I mean, say what
and I didn't see very much of that Hulk show. I saw maybe 3 episodes, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah, I just remember.
And the Hulk only showed up for like maybe 5 minutes at the end. Usually, it was usually Bill Bixby walking around trying not to get mad. Then he got mad, and it's like, put Lou Ferrigno out there.
When I'm angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, well, we don't like you when you're angry, but we're not really terrified of you when you're angry either. If you get mad, we'll just jog away because you don't look that fast. So Howard's rights are wrapped up with Universal Studios, and Lucas turns his attention to Indiana Jones instead. Naturally, as fate has it, almost right after Lucas gives up on Howard, his rights become available again. Universal Studios had major shifts in management. As cost-cutting measures, they gave up on the Marvel licenses. So Marvel's got all these licenses back, and they know there's some interest in Howard the Duck because George Lucas came asking about it. So they immediately flipped that license over to Celluloid Productions. Celluloid spelled with an S, not a C like you would think. They were known for, apparently at this point, for 2 things. How to teach your baby to read and how to teach your baby encyclopedic knowledge, which appear to be those deals with a flashcard you shove in your kid's face while tape plays in the background. Remember those where you're just like, say this! And then you're just staring and you're like, huh? Yep, apparently that is all they're known for at this point. And here they have the Howard the Duck license. They did have a plan for Howard the Duck, though. It was to be an episodic radio show that would broadcast on syndicated rock stations across the country and would soon be followed by a feature-length movie. Who would play Howard the Duck? Why, none other than Jim Belushi, who at this point was mainly known for co-starring with Michael Keaton in the show Working Stiffs and playing Burt Gunkel on the Scott Baio-driven Who's Watching the Kids in the late 70s. Also, I just realized if you say change the name from Who's Watching the Kids to Who's Watching the Children, it sounds a little more malevolent.
It does.
Yeah.
Which Belushi was this? Is this the one that died or the other one?
Nope, this is the less talented, more assholey one, Jim. There's some stories about Jim Belushi not being a real nice guy to be around.
You're talking about the one who died?
No, John Belushi, the one that died, apparently was a cooler one. They might have both been D-bags. But yeah, Jim is the one that was in K9 and...
okay.
Yeah.
He's the one I'm more familiar with.
Yeah, he's the one we're more familiar with because, he was alive during the 80s and 90s. He was in Raw Deal and stuff with Schwarzenegger.
Right.
I mean, he was entertaining in the movies as far as I know, but I was never like a huge fan of his.
Oh, by no means. I would never even give him a thought until he just happens to come up in conversation.
Yeah, he plays a good smarmy jackass usually, but that's kind of because he is a smarmy jackass in life.
Smarmy jackass who gets the girl somehow.
Yeah, somehow, right. When Jim Belushi was hired for the part, he even did some test reads, and rumor have it there's even an entire episode that was recorded but never released, and no one can really verify that. It's probably been lost to history, would be my guess. Celluloid was far enough in the process that they even hired a movie production crew, including hiring the dude that did the Wookiee costumes from the Star Wars Holiday Special. His plans were to actually make Howard the Duck a full puppet. Actually, no person in a costume, no real animatronics, just more of a puppet, kind of like wandering around. Closer to like E.T. sort of thing. Yeah.
That's pretty like risky for especially back then. I mean, I know it's not like, in the time we're not like, but it's only the 70s or whatever. I mean, but it's only the 2000s. But I mean, come on. Like, I don't know why they thought they'd have the technology to make that any more convincing.
Yeah.
No one in there.
Yeah, especially with a small company like Celluloid that probably doesn't know what they're doing. Because, George Lucas, at least he's got some pedigree or some big studios, but...
Well, I don't even think they want to do that now. They'd be like, oh, why would we do that? We can just use CG. Like,
nowadays it'd totally be CG unless they were going for like some puppet aesthetic.
Well, even still, like, to have a life like, I'm not saying there wouldn't be, I'm sure they'd make some amazing progress, but ultimately, like, I can't imagine a fully working robot would be convincing enough to prove it's like an actual character. I mean, yeah, it's a duck, so there's going to be some suspension of disbelief, but I don't know. I think they shot for the stars and missed.
Yeah. Well, project didn't make it that far anyway, so because for reasons unknown, it went nowhere. Project was canceled. Everybody fired.
Well, the problem was like not unknown. It probably just exactly what I said. Like, oh wait, this is awful. Yeah. Never mind.
Yeah, or maybe Jim Belushi slept with the producer's wife. Who knows? Allegedly. Yeah. Allegedly. We'll just throw that in case he's listening. Around this time, Steve Gerber gets wind of the fact that Celluloid has the rights to his character, and he's like, hey guys, that's my character. I need either some money or some creative control, or both preferably. So, go get them, lawyers. So he sent his lawyers after Marvel and Celluloid and was like, hey, I need to be part of this. And apparently this lawsuit actually was kind of the first of its kind where a creator was suing over a company doing something with the rights of his character he created against his will. So basically, the entire comic community was really interested in this whole lawsuit. In fact, to the point where the comic creator community also chipped in, and there is a group of artists came together to create the Foog, Friends of Old Gerber, and they sold art prints to help with his legal fees to fight against Marvel and get the right, get some control over his character. And even legendary Jack Kirby did a comic series called Destroyer Duck with Gerber as part of a special lawsuit benefit edition. And so everybody's rallying around Gerber. Pretty cool. Also, one kind of fun thing, how Jack Kirby knows Gerber? They were working on Thundar the Barbarian back in the early 80s together, a show which Gerber actually created. The creator of Howard the Duck created Thundar the Barbarian.
Huh.
Yeah. Want to tie it around even more? Thundar the Barbarian was done by Ruby Spears Studios, the same guys who did the Mr. T cartoon we talked about in the Mr. T episodes. We loop it around even more. So, yeah. But, yeah, kind of interesting. Jack Kirby and Steve Gerber were in Thundar the Barbarian. However, this lawsuit would go nowhere. Gerber would lose it for a couple of reasons. The main reason, he actually did not hold any legal rights to Howard the Duck. That contract we talked about earlier that he did not read so well, yeah. When he became a full-time comic book writer for Marvel, he signed over the rights to Howard the Duck over to Marvel. Marvel was like, hey, see this contract? We own the rights. And also another thing is Gerber might have been able to pull it out in the end, But also, Marvel's got a lot more money to throw at lawyers, and Steve Gerber's lawyer bills are reaching about 150 grand at this point when he gave up. And the comic book benefit only raised about 30,000 for him. So Gerber couldn't afford to keep it up in court and basically just had to be like, well, fine, you win, whatever, walk away. Even more pissed. However, because he did make a big stink, Marvel did give him a pittance to shut up and go away. They're like, here, take this money and just leave us alone. No one really knows how much it is, but if you listen to Gerber, some of the interviews around that time, it was not much.
Well, they probably just gave him enough to cover his lawyer bills. I mean, I would assume.
Yeah, somebody said that I saw some dude theorizing that in the end, maybe Gerber walked away with 10 grand in his pocket out of everything after all his bills and everything were paid. If he's lucky, which,
Right. Let this be a lesson to you guys. Always read your contract.
Yep, always read your contract. If you're not sure, it's worth it to pay a lawyer to look it over too, because it might be expensive, but they know what they're doing.
I mean, just for all the artists out there, if you're an artist and someone wants you to work with them, read the contract. Because I mean, no, for like Disney, for instance, this might have changed, but this is back in the day when I was going to animation school. It was very widely known that if you work for Disney, then they owned anything you did while you worked for them.
Even every little doodle you would do, even if you just like doodle on a napkin during your lunch break, I think they own that.
Exactly. They own that too. So just, while you're working working for them,
if you have a character in mind, you do not share that with anybody until you leave.
Right. So yeah, that's basically the gist of it.
Yep. Yeah, Disney is not a great company to work for at times, unless you're like an A-list celebrity or something.
Yeah, if you're like a grunt, it's just like, okay, just...
Yep, you're just thrown into the grinding machine. Speaking of a man that knows about the grinding machine, Steve Gerber. It's 1982, and he's out of the picture on everything. Celluloid has given up the rights to Howard the Duck, so they're available again. And who should show up? George Lucas, who just got done wrapping up Last Jedi and Temple of Doom. And now he needs another project to work on.
You mean Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, what'd I say?
Last Jedi.
Oh, Last Jedi. Yes, I did. My bad. I even wrote down Last Jedi. So Lucas yeah, totally different movie. We fast forwarded many years ahead. Good 35 years too far ahead. So Lucas gets together with his friends Hike and Katz, a married couple who had worked previously with Lucas as writers on American Graffiti and Temple of Doom, and they were also worked on Star Wars, the original Star Wars, as uncredited script doctors. Apparently, it is well known that they're the ones who wrote the majority of Princess Leia's snarky dialogue. So if you hear a Leia one-liner, it was probably written by Hike and Katz. This, because this trio has such a nice pedigree, it's George Lucas and his buddies who worked on Star Wars and American Graffiti and Indiana Jones. They go up to Marvel and they're like, hey, can we buy the rights to Howard the Duck? They're like, you guys are so talented and awesome and such a big name. We're just going to give you the rights and let you do whatever you want with the movie. Now go make us proud. And George Lucas was like, right on. I like this. I like where this is going. And then the trio said, hey, we got these movie rights in hand. We're going to go see what studio would like to buy this idea off of us or, agree to produce it. And Universal immediately just popped out screaming, us, for the love of God, please let us do it, George Lucas. Oh, for the love of God, we love you so much. The reason that they were so excited over this is because they actually passed on Star Wars a few years prior because they were concerned about budget problems. So they were like, nope, George, we don't want to do Star Wars. And they realized how big they messed up, and they did not want to mess up a second time.
They messed up again in a different way.
Yes, they did. So they literally were just like, George Lucas movie, how can we go wrong? Well, there's a few ways it could go wrong. First of all, George Lucas, he wanted to see the Howard the Duck movie made, and he kind of wanted to be a little bit of a producer and help out with it, but he didn't really want to make the movie. He was just having a lot of burnout because he just got done with Star Wars franchise and was working on Indiana Jones and all sorts of other stuff, busy with Skywalker Ranch. And he basically just wanted to be like, hey, I'm going to get this all set up, hand it off to my buddies Hike and Katz, and let them do everything. It'll be their movie. They can have autonomy. But Universal was like, George, we need your name on this. This is why we bought this from you. We need your name here. And George was like, all right, I really don't like this because it's going to cheapen, my friends' contributions to all this. But I guess if we have to, we have to. All right, fine.
What Gene? They should have seen that coming. I mean, Universal, like you just said, very clearly, we missed on Star Wars, so now we went on this. We went on your next project. And so, yeah, I mean, if I was Universal, I'd be irritated. Like, okay, we signed this dude because of who he is and what he's done, and he's going to turn around and hand it to some other people? That's fucked up.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, this Universal, I could see how that would be too. Be like, no, George Lucas, you're the one that sold it to us along with your friends. You're part of this. And also, Universal was right too. That George Lucas name on the top of the marquee, that was gold at that point. That was literally right up there with Spielberg's name being on something. You're just like, Lucas movie? How can we lose? Of course we'll go see it. It'll be great fun for the whole family.
Right. And walking out, what the hell did we just see?
George Lucas just said, okay, fine, put my name on there. And the trio sat down and decided to work out their idea for Howard the Duck. Their first idea, best idea of all, sounded pretty awesome. A fully animated, gritty film noir style movie where Howard the Duck goes around solving crimes and making wisecracks along the way. Lucas, Hike, and Cass all agreed Howard would make the best as an animated movie. No live action, all just completely hand-drawn, good old-fashioned style animation.
And their instincts were correct.
Their instincts were 100% correct. I would have loved to see that.
Because as you're describing that, I was picturing Howard the Duck in the style of the Spawn cartoon from HBO back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been really good.
That would have been good. I was picturing almost like a Howard the Duck meets Sin City kind of thing in my head for some reason.
Well, even that, I mean, yes, the Spawn show wasn't that kind of show, but there were times when he was when Spawn was doing the inner monologue, it was that kind of thing. So yeah, you'd same thing like Howard the Duck,
on top of building on a rainy night, narrating himself kind of thing. It's just like a really atmospheric, cool setup. Yep, I dig it. That's what I pictured too. Just something really nice and artistic flair. So Universal did not like this idea. They scrapped it right off the bat. Main reason because this was the first half of the 80s and animation was kind of at a low point of all time here. Disney wasn't making anything good, really. Don Bluth was just starting out and had Secret of NIMH, but All Dogs Go to Heaven was a few years out. DuckTales quality Saturday morning cartoons was still a way off, and we were still kind of rooted in the Hanna-Barbera level of animation that people were stuck in. And so that's kind of what everybody just associated cartoons with. Is like, it's going to be like a Hanna-Barbera thing. And Universal was like, no, that sounds cheap. We don't want to do that. We need something that's going to be a big budget, a huge budget, something that'll wow people, and animation won't do that. Plus, animation is expensive.
We would lose a lot of money.
Yeah. And another reason Universal wanted this to be live action, apparently, due to a contract he signed in the early 70s, Lucas actually owed Universal a live action film. Yeah, back in 73, he signed a 3-picture deal with him, and one of it was he had to release another live action film with him. So Universal pulled out that Uno reverse card and was like, hey, look at this. You have to make this live action. So Lucas said, all right, cool. We got to do some live action stuff. Their next plan was to harness the power of Lucas's new computer animation division, the Graphics Group. Remember when graphics was kind of like a cool buzz term that made you think of computers?
Yes.
The Graphics Group was to bring Howard the Duck to life as a CGI character alongside real actors. And as you can guess, the tech was not up to snuff for the time. In fact, the early CGI tests were so bad that the crew was fired immediately because they were just like, this ain't working. You all get out of here.
And not terminated. They were lit on fire.
They were literally lit on fire. They were put out in the parking lot, doused in gasoline, and the whole thing was recorded with a soundtrack put to it by John Williams. And they play that at orientation ever since then at the Lucasfilm Studios. Be like, you fail, this is what happens to you.
I was thinking more of the yakety sack playing over.
As people are just running around the parking lot on fire.
As they're rising, the flames will spit up.
Yeah, if you wanted a level of example of what CGI was doing back then, you can check out the young Sherlock Holmes for the stained glass night scene. It was really cool for the time, but definitely not something you want to base a whole movie character around. And literally that scene's 30 seconds or something like that. Not something you want to do a whole movie with. Finally, their last idea was to call upon industrial light and magic and do the old-fashioned puppet up close and an actor in a costume route for faraway shots, something they were quite familiar with after doing all them Ewoks from Return of the Jedi. Industrial Light and Magic shows up and they're like, all right, cool, we'll get working on a puppet. Story-wise, even though it was going to be like the puppet and live-action people, they still wanted to stick with the gritty film noir style that they were talking about with the cartoon, and they actually wanted to shoot it in Hawaii and have it as Howard already established in the world as a, crime-solving duck. Duck World wasn't going to be a thing because, well, Duck World was actually something that came along later in the comic series. So people who like Lucas, who was a fan of the original run of comics, Duck World wasn't really in their lexicon. So they're just like, hey, gonna be like the comics. Howard's just gonna be on Earth. People are gonna accept it as an established character, and make it good that way. And a side note, the producer Hike, he admitted that they picked Hawaii just because they wanted to go to Hawaii for a vacation and shoot there, and it'd be fun.
So the movie was set in Hawaii?
It was supposed to be set in Hawaii, or they wanted to go shoot it in Hawaii. But the actual movie takes place in Cleveland. Yeah.
Okay.
They never actually shot it in Hawaii, though. So.
Okay.
Yeah, Universal did not okay the money for them to fly out to Hawaii. They're like, no, you stay in California. Yeah. Universal wasn't big on the idea of the film noir aspect either. What they wanted was a big budget, special effects laden comedy adventure romp with a big action finish. Basically, they wanted to recreate Ghostbusters, which came out a few years earlier and blew up massively. Because Universal, they just sat down and were like, hey, man, a Ghostbusters style movie with George Lucas heading it, that can only mean massive amounts of money, the likes of which we've never even thought of before. Again, that did not happen.
Yeah, right.
And they did, however, when developing the movie, they brought in Steve Gerber to give in some input on the movie. And here's kind of where revisionist history kicks in. And this actually happens a couple times with the movie. Like, before the movie was released, Steve Gerber has some interviews. He's like, yeah, man, I'm working on this Howard the Duck movie. They're listening to my input. They're taking it all good. And this is probably going to be good. I think I can get behind this and endorse it. After the movie was released, though, he would basically distance himself from the movie, like, no. They didn't listen to a damn bit of my input. None of that is on me. That's all on them. Which is kind of something that happened with pretty much everybody involved in the movie, because everybody thought this movie was going to be a huge hit when it first came out.
Take a large step back, like, whoop.
Yep, exactly. Ooh, no. I never thought that would be big. They all lied, though. So, after everything is hammered out, in August 1985, the movie was announced and given a $30 million budget, which was the same as Ghostbusters, or about $80 million in today's cash. It was marketed as the next big thing is from George Lucas, Indiana Jones, but with a duck. And Lucas, again, wasn't a fan of this because they're basically just making it sound like he had all sorts of control over it, which he really didn't. Apparently, stories vary, but I guess he was only on set for like 2 or 3 days, and most of his work was like just over the phone advisement, them calling him and be like, hey, you got any advice for this, George? And be like, try this. So he really wasn't in that movie that much.
It was kind of like one of those things like, let's call him up so we say his advice.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hey, George, should I wear my black shirt with jeans or should I wear my red shirt with jeans? Like, I think you should do the black. Thanks, George.
Or possibly something even more banal, like, hey, George, in the meeting room, do you know where the coffee filters are? I think you were the last one to have them the other day.
Like, oh no, well, I'll send a courier over to give you some more coffee filters. Thank you. Executive producer.
So now on to the production, crew, and casting, which is a big ordeal by itself. First problem was Howard's animatronic puppet itself. See, the crew had been working on it for 7 months, and then with 3 months left in shooting, they realized they had like nothing done on this puppet. In fact, they had they had 7 months, and they still basically really had nothing. And they realized they had 3 months left and said, oh crap, we need to get a fire lit under us. Yeah, I don't know how you go 7 months and barely have anything going.
Yeah, but they weren't trying. I mean, the only excuse I could say is like, it wouldn't stop rampaging. Okay,
yeah,
well, fine. Yeah, I get it. I can see why you're having problems. But otherwise,
4 foot Howard the Duck costume is just kicking everybody's ass.
We've lost 12 people so far. We need to stop.
There's just this giant barred up door on the studio. It's like, don't open, duck inside.
Every iteration gets thrown in there. We don't deactivate it. We're hoping they eventually will kill themselves. But I think they're starting to work together.
Yeah, right. We think they're actually making plans together. This isn't good. So this is actually where having George Lucas as a friend came in handy, as this one time they called him up and like, George, help. So he sent out some buddies of his who were actually really good at working on puppets. First was Tim Rose from the Star Wars franchise. This was the dude who's in charge of all the close-up shots of Admiral Akbar and Salacious Crumb, and the oddly fuckable Sice Noodles from the band in Return of the Jedi. Second was another man who is an amazing animatronic creation.
I think that says more about you than Sice Noodles.
Oh, it absolutely does.
Yeah. I think you just leaked out what your type is.
Oh yeah, I know. I could just picture my parents back in like 1987 and be like, wow, he's sure watching that one part of this movie a lot. Damn.
we're running low on lotion and toilet paper all the time.
Sean, where are all the Kleenex going to? Good God, that was like a box in a day. Why is our tape worn out from rewinding it so much at this point?
Hey, check out this Playboy. I don't know if her body was rounder and had longer legs and arms. I don't need her mouth to be a lot longer, like she's trying to drink something far away. Okay.
Yes.
I'm done.
You're pretty much right on, actually. So, moving on from my perversions. Second man that Lucas summoned by his black magic was another amazing animatronic creator, Tad Jnosky, who created Hoggle from Labyrinth. Pretty awesome character overall.
Oh, damn. That's actually a good.
Yeah, so basically, Howard the
pretty,
Duck at the last moment was put together by the dude who did Admiral Akbar and Hoggle. That's I would
Nice.
consider that an all-star team.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
Hoggle is badass. I love Hoggle.
Yep, and they both use the exact same setup that Howard the Duck did, which was, puppets for like animatronic puppets, really up close shots, and a person in costume for far away. So these guys knew how to get that done. I think this is a fine and dandy place to take a break with this episode. Tune in next week when we continue our Howard the Duck talk, where we discuss what Oscar-winning actor was slated to play Howard, which cast member was set on fire, Nate's favorite turtle, and find out why one of the actors was banned from the movie premiere for the stupidest reason you can imagine. You'll want to be here for that. It's really something, trust me. All that and so much more on the next Oft Off Topic. This is where the ending jingle goes. This is where the ending jingle goes. I don't know if we need one. I don't know if we'll get one. But if we do, then here is where it goes.